Part 11. The formation of attitude. 3. What shapes a person's attitude? A lot goes into an attitude, but a lot more comes out of it. Attitudes aren't shaped in a vacuum. People are born with certain characteristics, and those impact their attitudes. But many other factors play an even greater role in people's lives and in the formation of their attitudes. While these factors continually impact people, in general, they make the greatest impression during the following times of life. Stages. Factors. Birth, inherent personality/temperament. Birth, environment. Ages 1 to 6, word expression. Adult acceptance/affirmation. Ages 6 to 10, self-image. Exposure to new experiences. Ages 11 to 21, peers, physical appearance. Ages 21 to 61, marriage, family, job, success adjustments, assessment of life. Personality, who I am. All people are born as distinct individuals. Even two children with the same parents, same environment, and same training are totally different from each other. These differences contribute to the spice of life we all enjoy. Like tract homes that all look alike, if we all had similar personalities, our journey through life would certainly be boring. Generally, people with certain temperaments develop specific attitudes common to that temperament. I love the story of two men out fishing together who began discussing their wives. One said, "If all men were like me, they would all want to be married to my wife." The other man quickly replied, "If they were all like me, none of them would want to be married to her." A set of attitudes accompanies each personality type. Generally, people with certain temperaments develop specific attitudes common to that temperament. A few years ago, Tim LaHaye, co-author of the popular Left Behind novels, lectured and wrote about the 4 basic temperaments. Through observation, I have noticed that a person with what he calls a choleric personality often exhibits attitudes of perseverance and aggressiveness. A sanguine person is generally positive and looks on the bright side of life. An introspective melancholy individual can be negative at times, while a phlegmatic is prone to say, "Easy come, easy go." Every individual's personality is composed of a mixture of these temperaments, and there are exceptions to these generalizations. However, a temperament ordinarily follows a track that can be identified by tracing a person's attitudes. Environment, what's around me? I believe that environment is a greater controlling factor in our attitude development than our personality or other inherited traits. Before my wife, Margaret, and I began our family, we decided to adopt our children. We wanted to give a child who might not normally have the benefit of a loving faith-filled home an opportunity to live in that environment. Although our children may not physically resemble us, they certainly have been molded by the environment in which we have reared them. The environment of early childhood develops a person's belief system. Children continually pick up priorities, attitudes, interests, and philosophies from their environment. It is a fact that what I really believe affects my attitude. However, the things I believe may not be true. What I believe may not be healthy. It may even hurt others and destroy me. Yet an attitude is reinforced by a belief, whether it is right or wrong. Environment is the first influencer of our belief system. Therefore, the foundation of an attitude is laid in the environment to which we were born. Environment becomes even more significant when we realize that the beginning attitudes are the most difficult to change. Word expression, what I hear. You've undoubtedly heard the old saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me." Don't you believe that? In fact, after the bruises have disappeared and the physical pain is gone, the inward pain of hurtful words remains. Years ago when I was leading a church, during one of our staff meetings I asked the pastors, secretaries, and custodians to raise their hands if they could remember a childhood experience that hurt deeply because of someone's words. Everyone raised his hand. One pastor recalled the time when he sat in a reading circle at school. Do you remember how intimidating those sessions were? When his time came to read, he mispronounced the word photography. He read it photography instead of photography. The teacher corrected him and the class laughed. He still remembers, 40 years later. One positive result of that experience was his desire from that moment on to pronounce words correctly. Today, one of the reasons he excels as a speaker is because of that determination. Adult acceptance/affirmation, what I feel. Often when I am speaking to leaders, I tell them about the importance of accepting and affirming the ones they are leading. The truth is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Think back to your school days. Who was your favorite teacher? Now think of why. Probably your warmest memories are of someone who accepted and affirmed you. We seldom remember what our teacher said to us, but we do remember how they loved us. Long before we understand teaching, we reach out for understanding. Long after we have forgotten the teachings, we remember the feeling of acceptance or rejection. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Many times I have asked people if they enjoyed their pastor's sermon the previous week. After a positive response, I ask, what was his subject? 75% of the time they cannot give me the sermon title. They do not remember the exact subject, but they do remember the atmosphere and attitude in which it was delivered. My favorite Sunday school teachers from my childhood are beautiful examples of this truth. First came Katie, my second grade teacher. When I was sick and missed her class, she would come and visit me on Monday. She would ask how I was feeling and give me a 5-cent trinket that was worth $1 million to me. Katie would say, "Johnny, I always teach better when you are in the class. When you come next Sunday morning, would you raise your hand so I can see you are in attendance? Then I will teach better." I can still remember raising my hand and watching Katie smile at me from the front of the class. I also remember other kids raising their hands on Sundays when Katie began to teach and her class grew rapidly. That year, the Sunday school superintendent wanted to split the class and start a new one across the hall. He asked for volunteers for the new class and no one raised his hand. Why? No kid wanted to go with a new teacher and miss Katie's continual demonstration of love. Another teacher I remember is Glenn Leatherwood. He taught all the junior high school boys in the church where I grew up. Did you ever teach a group of 10 wiggles per minute boys? Usually those teachers go straight from teaching that class to their heavenly reward. But not Glenn. He taught junior high boys for another 30 years. The 12 months I spent in his class made a profound impact on my faith and my life's work. I was also privileged to grow up in a very affirming family. I never questioned my parents' love and acceptance. They continually affirmed their love through actions and words. When our children were growing up, Margaret and I tried to create that same environment for them. I believe that our kids saw or sensed our acceptance and affirmation at least 30 times a day. Today I'd say our grandchildren get almost twice as much. That's not too much. Have you ever been told too many times that you are important, loved, and appreciated? Remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Self-image, how I see myself. It is impossible to perform consistently in a manner inconsistent with the way we see ourselves. In other words, we usually act in direct response to our self-image. Nothing is more difficult to accomplish than changing outward actions without changing inward feelings. One of the best ways to improve those inward feelings is to put some success under your belt. My daughter Elizabeth has a tendency to be shy and wants to hold back on new experiences. But once she is warmed up to a situation, it's full steam ahead. When she was in first grade, her school had a candy bar sale. Each child was given 30 candy bars and was challenged to sell every one of them. When I picked up Elizabeth from school, she was holding her challenge and needed some positive encouragement. It was time for a sales meeting with my new salesgirl. All the way home, I taught her how to sell candy bars. I surrounded each teaching point with a half dozen "you can do it" your smile will win them over. I believe in you phrases. By the end of our 15-minute drive, the young lady sitting beside me had become a charming, committed saleslady. Off she went to the neighborhood with little brother Joel eating one of the candy bars and declaring that it was truly the best he had ever devoured. At the end of the day, all 30 bars had been sold and Elizabeth was feeling great. I will never forget the words she prayed as I tucked her into bed that night. "Oh God, thanks for the candy sale at school. It's great. Oh Lord, help make me a winner. Amen." Elizabeth's prayer reflects the heart's desire of every person. We all want to be winners. Sure enough, Elizabeth came home the next day with another box of candy bars. Now the big test. She'd exhausted the supply of friendly neighbors, and she was thrust into the cruel world of the unknown buyer. Elizabeth admitted fear as we went to a shopping center to sell our wares. Again I offered encouragement, a few more selling tips, more encouragement, the right location, more encouragement. And she did it. The experience amounted to 2 days of selling, 2 sold-out performances, 2 happy people, and 1 boosted self-image. How we see ourselves reflects how others see us. If we like ourselves, it increases the odds that others will like us. Self-image sets the parameters for the construction of our attitudes. We act in response to how we see ourselves. We will never go beyond the boundaries that stake out our true feelings about ourselves. Those new territories can be explored only when our self-image is strong enough to give us permission to go there. Exposure to new experiences, opportunities for growth. French philosopher François Voltaire likened life to a game of cards. Each player must accept the cards dealt to him. But once those cards are in the hand, he alone decides how to play them to win the game. We always have a number of opportunities in our hand, and we must decide whether to take a risk and act on them. Nothing in life causes more stress, yet at the same time provides more opportunity for growth than new experiences. If you are a parent, you will find it impossible to shield your children from new experiences that might be negative. So it is essential to prepare positive encounters that will build self-image and confidence. Both positive and negative experiences can be used as tools in preparing children for life. Children need continual reassurance and praise when their new experiences are less than positive. In fact, the worse the experience, the more encouragement they need. But sometimes we become discouraged when they are discouraged. This is a good formula to adopt. New experiences plus teaching applications x love equals growth. Association with peers, who influences me. What others indicate about their perceptions of us affects how we perceive ourselves. Usually we respond to the expectations of others. This truth becomes evident to parents when their children go to school. No longer can parents control their children's environment. My parents understood that others could exercise a sizable amount of control over their son's behavior, so they were determined to watch and control our peer relationships as much as possible. Their strategy: provide a climate in the Maxwell home that was appealing to their 2 boys' friends. This meant sacrificing their finances and time. They provided us with a shuffleboard game, ping pong table, pool table, pinball machine, chemistry set, basketball court, and all the sports equipment imaginable. We also had a mother who was spectator, referee, counselor, arbitrator, and fan. And the kids came, often 20 to 25 at a time. All sizes, shapes, and colors. Everyone had fun, and my parents observed our friends. Sometimes, after the gang had gone, my parents would ask about one of our friends. They would openly discuss his language or attitudes and encourage us not to act or think that way. I realize now that most of my major decisions as a young boy were influenced by my parents' teaching and observation of my associations. Casey Stengel, who was a successful manager of the New York Yankees baseball team, understood the power of associations on a ballplayer's attitude. He gave Billy Martin some advice when he was a rookie manager. Martin recalled, Casey said there would be 15 players on your team who will run through a wall for you, 5 who will hate you, and 5 who are undecided. When you make out your rooming list, always room your losers together. Never room a good guy with a loser. Those losers who stay together will blame the manager for everything, but it won't spread if you keep them isolated. Charles Tremendous Jones, author of Life is Tremendous, says, "What you will become in 5 years will be determined by what you read and who you associate with." That's good for all of us to remember. Physical appearance, how we look to others. Our looks play an important part in the construction of our attitude. Incredible pressure is placed upon people to possess the in look, which seems to be the standard of acceptance. The next time you're watching television, notice how much the commercials emphasize looks. Notice the percentage of ads dealing with clothing, diet, exercise, and overall physical attractiveness. Hollywood says, blandness is out and beauty is in. This influences our perception of our worth. What can make it even more difficult is the realization that others also judge our worth by our appearance. Recently, I read a business article that stated, our physical attractiveness helps determine our income. For example, the research reported in that article showed the discrepancies between the salaries of men 6 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. The taller men consistently received higher salaries. Like it or not, physical appearance, and one's perception of it, impacts a person's attitude. Marriage, family, and job are security and status. New influences begin affecting our attitude as we approach our mid-20s. It is during this time that most people start a career. They also often get married. That means another person influences our perspective. When I speak on attitudes, I always emphasize the need to surround ourselves with positive people. One of the saddest comments that I often receive comes from someone who tells me their marriage partner is negative and doesn't want to change. To a certain extent, when the negative mate does not want to change, the positive one is imprisoned by negativism. In such situations, I advise the couple to remember their spouse as the person they loved in their courtship days. Their marriage will improve if each other's weaknesses are not emphasized. But many end up in divorce court because the strengths are ignored. The partners go from expecting the best to expecting the worst, from building on strengths to focusing on weaknesses. All of the factors I've mentioned go into the mix of attitude. They have impacted who you are and those whom you lead. But remember this, whether you are 11, 42, or 65, your attitude toward life is still under construction. It's never too late for a person to change his attitude. And that's the subject of the next chapter.
Can an attitude be changed? The key to having a good attitude is the willingness to change. We are either the masters or the victims of our attitudes. It is a matter of personal choice. Who we are today is the result of choices we made yesterday. Tomorrow we will become what we choose today. To change means to choose to change. I'm told that in northern Canada there are just 2 seasons, winter and July. When the back roads begin to thaw, they become muddy. Vehicles going into the backwoods country leave deep ruts that become frozen when cold weather returns. For those entering remote areas during the winter months, there are signs that read, "Driver, please choose carefully which rut you drive in, because you'll be in it for the next 20 miles. Some people seem to feel stuck in their current attitudes, like a car in a 20-mile rut. However, attitude is not permanent. If you're not happy with yours, know that you can change it. If someone you lead has a bad attitude, then you can help them to change, but only if they truly want to change. Anyone can become the kind of positive person for whom life is a joy and every day is filled with potential if they genuinely desire to. If you want to have a great attitude, then make the following choices. Choice number 1, evaluate your present attitude. The process begins with knowing where you're starting from. Evaluating your present attitude will take some time. If possible, try to separate yourself from your attitude. The goal of this exercise is not to see the bad you but a bad attitude that keeps you from being a more fulfilled person. You can make key changes only when you identify the problem. When he sees a logjam, the professional logger climbs a tall tree and locates a key log, blows that log free, and lets the stream do the rest. An amateur would start at the edge of the jam and move all the logs, eventually moving the key log. Obviously, both methods will get the logs moving, but the professional does his work more quickly and effectively. To find the key logs in your attitude, use the following evaluation process, and write your answers in a journal or someplace where you can later refer back to them. Identify problem feelings. What attitudes make you feel the most negative about yourself? Usually feelings can be sensed before the problem is clarified. Identify problem behavior. What attitudes cause you the most problems when dealing with others? Identify problem thinking. We are the sum of our thoughts. As a man thinks within himself, so he is. 1. What thoughts consistently control your mind? Although this is the beginning step in correcting attitude problems, these are not as easy to identify as the first two. Clarify truth. In order to know how to change, you need to examine your feelings in light of truth. If you are a person of faith, then use the scriptures. What do they tell you about how your attitude should be? Secure commitment. At this stage, what must I do to change, turns into I must change. Remember, the choice to change is the one decision that must be made, and only you can make it. Plan and carry out your choice, act on your decision immediately and repeatedly. Choice number 2, realize that faith is stronger than fear. The only thing that will guarantee the success of a difficult or doubtful undertaking is faith from the beginning that you can do it. Philosopher William James said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that people can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." Change depends on your frame of mind. Believe that you can change. Ask your friends and colleagues to encourage you at every opportunity. And if you are a person of faith, ask for God's help. He knows your problems, and He is willing and able to help you overcome them. Choice number 3, write a statement of purpose. When I was a boy, my father decided to build a basketball court for my brother and me. He made a cement driveway, put a backboard on the garage, and was just getting ready to put up the basket when he was called away on an emergency. He promised to put up the hoop as soon as he returned. No problem, I thought. I have a brand new Spalding ball and a new cement driveway on which to dribble it. For a few minutes I bounced the ball on the cement. Soon that became boring, so I took the ball and threw it up against the backboard, once. I let the ball run off the court and didn't pick it up again until Dad returned to put up the rim. Why? It's no fun playing basketball without a goal. The joy is in having something to aim for. In order to have fun and direction in changing your attitude, you must establish a clearly stated goal. This goal should be as specific as possible, written out and signed, with a time frame attached to it. The purpose statement should be placed in a visible spot where you see it several times a day to give you reinforcement. You will attain this goal if each day you do 3 things. 1. Write specifically what you desire to accomplish each day. The biblical story of David's encounter with Goliath is a fine illustration of faith and how it may overcome insurmountable odds with seemingly inadequate resources. But one thing perplexed me when I first began to study David's life. Why did he pick 5 stones for his sling on his way to encounter Goliath? The longer I pondered, the more perplexed I became. Why 5 stones? There was only one giant. Choosing 5 stones seemed to be a flaw in his faith. Did he think he was going to miss and that he would have 4 more chances? Some time later I was reading in 2 Samuel, and I got the answer. Goliath had 4 sons, so that means there were 5 giants. In David's reckoning, there was 1 stone per giant. Now that is what I mean about being specific in our faith. What are the giants you must slay to make your attitude what it needs to be? What resources will you need? Don't be overcome with frustration when you see the problems. Take 1 giant at a time. Military strategists teach their armies to fight 1 front at a time. Settle which attitude you want to tackle at this time. Write it down. As you successfully begin to win battles, write them down. And spend time reading about past victories because it will encourage you. 2. Verbalize to an encouraging friend what you want to accomplish each day. Belief is inward conviction, faith is outward action. You will receive both encouragement and accountability by verbalizing your intentions. One of the ways people resolve a conflict is to verbalize it to themselves or someone else. This practice is also vital in reaching your desired attitudes. I know successful salesmen who repeat this phrase out loud 50 times each morning and 50 times each evening. I can do it. Continually saying positive statements helps them believe in themselves and causes them to act on that belief. Start this process by changing your vocabulary. Here are some suggestions. Eliminate these words completely. Make these words a part of your vocabulary. 1. I can't. 1. I can. 2. If. 2. I will. 3. Doubt. 3. Expect the best. 4. I don't think. 4. I know. 5. I don't have the time. 5. I will make the time. 6. Maybe. 6. Positively. 7. I'm afraid of. 7. I am confident. 8. I don't believe. 8. I do believe. 9. Minimize. I. 9. Promote. You. 10. It's impossible. 10. All things are possible. 3. Take action on your goal each day. The difference between a wise man and a foolish one is his response to what he already knows. A wise man follows up on what he hears while a foolish man knows but does not act. To change, you must take action. And while you're at it, do something positive for someone else too. Nothing improves a person's outlook like unselfish service to someone with a greater need than their own. Choice number 4, have the desire to change. No choice will determine the success of your attitude change more than desiring to change. When all else fails, desire alone can keep you heading in the right direction. Many people have climbed over insurmountable obstacles to make themselves better when they realize that change is possible if they want it badly enough. Let me illustrate. While hopping about one day, a frog happened to slip into a very large pothole along a country road. All of his attempts at jumping out were in vain. Soon a rabbit came upon the frog trapped in the hole and offered to help him out. He, too, failed. After various animals from the forest made 3 or 4 gallon attempts to help the poor frog out, they finally gave up. "We'll go back and get you some food," they said. "It looks like you're going to be here a while." However, not long after they took off to get food, they heard the frog hopping along after them. They couldn't believe it. "We thought you couldn't get out," they exclaimed. "Oh, I couldn't," replied the frog. "But you see, there was a big truck coming right at me, and I had to." Fall in love with the challenge of change and watch the desire to change grow. It is when we have to get out of the potholes of life that we change. As long as we have acceptable options, we will not change. The truth is that most people are more comfortable with old problems than new solutions. They respond to their needs for a turnaround in life like the Duke of Cambridge, who once said, "Any change, at any time, for any reason, is to be deplored." People who believe that nothing should ever be done for the first time never see anything done. People can change, and that is the greatest motivation of all. Nothing sparks the fires of desire more than the sudden realization that you do not have to stay the same. Fall in love with the challenge of change and watch the desire to change grow. That's what happened to Aleda Hewison, 78, of Rotterdam, Netherlands. She had been a smoker for 50 years, and for 50 years she tried to give up the habit. But she was unsuccessful. Then Leo Jensen, 79, proposed marriage and refused to go through with the wedding until Aleda gave up smoking. Aleda says, "Willpower never was enough to get me off the habit. Love did it. My life is dedicated to helping others reach their potential. I suggest that you Follow the advice of Mark Twain, who said, "Take your mind out every now and then and dance on it. It is getting all caked up." It was his way of saying, get out of that rut. Too many times we settle into a set way of thinking and accept limitations that need not be placed upon us. Embrace change, and it will change you. Choice number 5, live one day at a time. Any person can fight the battle for just one day. It is only when you and I add the burdens of those two awful eternities, yesterday and tomorrow, that we tremble. It is not the experiences of today that drive people to distraction, it is the remorse or bitterness for something that happened yesterday and the dread of what tomorrow may bring. Let us therefore live but one day at a time, today. Choice number 6, change your thought patterns. That which holds our attention determines our actions. We are where we are and what we are because of the dominating thoughts that occupy our minds. Take a look at this syllogism. It emphasizes the power of our thought life. Major premise, we can control our thoughts. Minor premise, our feelings come from our thoughts. Conclusion, we can control our feelings by learning to change how we think. It is that simple. Our feelings come from our thoughts. Therefore, we can change them by changing our thought patterns. Our thought life, not our circumstances, determines our happiness. Often I see people who are convinced that they will be happy when they attain a certain goal. When they reach the goal, many times they do not find the fulfillment they anticipated. The secret to staying on an even keel? Fill your mind with good thoughts. The Apostle Paul advised, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. 2. He understood that the things that hold our attention determine our action. Choice number 7, develop good habits. An attitude is nothing more than a habit of thought. The process for developing habits, good or bad, is the same. It is as easy to form the habit of succeeding as it is to succumb to the habit of failure. Habits aren't instincts, they're acquired actions or reactions. They don't just happen, they are caused. Once the original cause of a habit is determined, it is within your power to accept or reject it. Most people allow their habits to control them. When those habits are hurtful, they negatively impact their attitudes. The following steps will assist you in changing bad habits into good ones. Step number 1, list your bad habits. Step number 2, what was the original cause? Step number 3, what are the supporting causes? Step number 4, determine a positive habit to replace the bad one. Step number 5, think about the good habit, its benefits and results. Step number 6, take action to develop this habit. Step number 7, daily act upon this habit for reinforcement. Step number 8, reward yourself by noting one of the benefits from your good habit. Choice number 8, continually choose to have a right attitude. Once you make the choice to possess a good attitude, the work has only just begun. After that comes a life of continually deciding to grow and maintaining the right outlook. Attitudes have a tendency to revert back to their original patterns if they are not carefully guarded and cultivated. As you work to improve your attitude or to help the attitude of someone you lead, recognize that there are 3 stages of change where a person must deliberately choose the right attitude. Early stage, the first few days are always the most difficult. Old habits are hard to break. You must continually be on guard mentally to take the right action. Middle stage, the moment good habits begin to take root, options open that bring on new challenges. During this stage, new habits will form that can be good or bad. The good news is that the more right choices and habits you develop, the more likely other good habits will be formed. Later stage, in the later stage, complacency is the enemy. We all know someone, perhaps us, who lost weight only to fall back into old eating habits and gain it back. Don't let down your guard until the change is complete. And even then, be vigilant and make sure you don't fall into old negative habits. You are the only one who can determine what you will think and how you will act. and that means you can make your attitude what you want it to be. But even if you succeed and become a positive person, that won't shield you from negative experiences. How does a positive person deal with obstacles and remain upbeat? To find the answer to that question, read the next chapter. Choice number 4, have the desire to change. No choice will determine the success of your attitude change more than desiring to change. When all else fails, desire alone can keep you heading in the right direction. Many people have climbed over insurmountable obstacles to make themselves better when they realize that change is possible if they want it badly enough. Let me illustrate. While hopping about one day, a frog happened to slip into a very large pothole along a country road. All of his attempts at jumping out were in vain. Soon a rabbit came upon the frog trapped in the hole and offered to help him out. He, too, failed. After various animals from the forest made 3 or 4 gallon attempts to help the poor frog out, they finally gave up. "We'll go back and get you some food," they said. "It looks like you're going to be here a while." However, not long after they took off to get food, they heard the frog hopping along after them. They couldn't believe it. "We thought you couldn't get out," they exclaimed. "Oh, I couldn't," replied the frog. "But you see, there was a big truck coming right at me, and I had to." Fall in love with the challenge of change and watch the desire to change grow. It is when we have to get out of the potholes of life that we change. As long as we have acceptable options, we will not change. The truth is that most people are more comfortable with old problems than new solutions. They respond to their needs for a turnaround in life like the Duke of Cambridge, who once said, "Any change, at any time, for any reason, is to be deplored." People who believe that nothing should ever be done for the first time never see anything done. People can change, and that is the greatest motivation of all. Nothing sparks the fires of desire more than the sudden realization that you do not have to stay the same. Fall in love with the challenge of change and watch the desire to change grow. That's what happened to Aleda Hewison, 78, of Rotterdam, Netherlands. She had been a smoker for 50 years, and for 50 years she tried to give up the habit. But she was unsuccessful. Then Leo Jensen, 79, proposed marriage and refused to go through with the wedding until Aleda gave up smoking. Aleda says, "Willpower never was enough to get me off the habit. Love did it. My life is dedicated to helping others reach their potential." I suggest that you follow the advice of Mark Twain, who said, "Take your mind out every now and then and dance on it. It is getting all caked up." It was his way of saying, get out of that rut. Too many times we settle into a set way of thinking and accept limitations that need not be placed upon us. Embrace change, and it will change you. Choice number 5, live one day at a time. Any person can fight the battle for just one day. It is only when you and I add the burdens of those 2 awful eternities, yesterday and tomorrow, that we tremble. It is not the experiences of today that drive people to distraction, it is the remorse or bitterness for something that happened yesterday and the dread of what tomorrow may bring. Let us therefore live but one day at a time, today. Choice number 6, change your thought patterns. That which holds our attention determines our actions. We are where we are and what we are because of the dominating thoughts that occupy our minds. Take a look at this syllogism. It emphasizes the power of our thought life. Major premise, we can control our thoughts. Minor premise, our feelings come from our thoughts. Conclusion, we can control our feelings by learning to change how we think. It is that simple. Our feelings come from our thoughts. Therefore, we can change them by changing our thought patterns. Our thought life, not our circumstances, determines our happiness. Often I see people who are convinced that they will be happy when they attain a certain goal. When they reach the goal, many times they do not find the fulfillment they anticipated. The secret to staying on an even keel? Fill your mind with good thoughts. The Apostle Paul advised, Whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. 2. He understood that the things that hold our attention determine our action. Choice number 7. Develop good habits. An attitude is nothing more than a habit of thought. The process for developing habits, good or bad, is the same. It is as easy to form the habit of succeeding as it is to succumb to the habit of failure. Habits aren't instincts, they're acquired actions or reactions. They don't just happen, they are caused. Once the original cause of a habit is determined, it is within your power to accept or reject it. Most people allow their habits to control them. When those habits are hurtful, they negatively impact their attitudes. The following steps will assist you in changing bad habits into good ones. Step number 1. List your bad habits. Step number 2. What was the original cause? Step number 3. What are the supporting causes? Step number 4. Determine a positive habit to replace the bad one. Step number 5. Think about the good habit, its benefits and results. Step number 6. Take action to develop this habit. Step number 7. Daily act upon this habit for reinforcement. Step number 8. Reward yourself by noting one of the benefits from your good habit. Choice number 8. Continually choose to have a right attitude. Once you make the choice to possess a good attitude, the work has only just begun. After that comes a life of continually deciding to grow and maintaining the right outlook. Attitudes have a tendency to revert back to their original patterns if they are not carefully guarded and cultivated. As you work to improve your attitude or to help the attitude of someone you lead, recognize that there are 3 stages of change where a person must deliberately choose the right attitude. Early stage, the first few days are always the most difficult. Old habits are hard to break. You must continually be on guard mentally to take the right action. Middle stage, the moment good habits begin to take root, options open that bring on new challenges. During this stage, new habits will form that can be good or bad. The good news is that the more right choices and habits you develop, the more likely other good habits will be formed. Later stage, in the later stage, complacency is the enemy. We all know someone, perhaps us, who lost weight only to fall back into old eating habits and gain it back. Don't let down your guard until the change is complete. And even then, be vigilant and make sure you don't fall into old negative habits. You are the only one who can determine what you will think and how you will act. And that means you can make your attitude what you want it to be. But even if you succeed and become a positive person, that won't shield you from negative experiences. How does a positive person deal with obstacles and remain upbeat? To find the answer to that question, read the next chapter. 5. Can obstacles actually enhance an attitude? The greatest battle you wage against failure occurs on the inside, not the outside. Working artists David Bales and Ted Orland tell a story about an art teacher who did an experiment with his grading system for 2 groups of students. It is a parable on the benefits of failure. Here is what happened. The ceramics teacher announced on opening day that he was dividing the class into 2 groups. All those on the left side of the studio, he said, would be graded solely on the quantity of work they produced, all those on the right solely on its quality. His procedure was simple. On the final day of class he would bring in his bathroom scale and weigh the work of the quantity group, 50 pounds of pots rated an A, 40 pounds of B, and so on. Those being graded on quality, however, needed to produce only 1 pot, albeit a perfect one, to get an A. Well, come grading time a curious fact emerged: the works of the highest quality were all produced by the group being graded for quantity. It seems that while the quantity group was busily churning out piles of work and learning from their mistakes, the quality group had sat theorizing about perfection, and in the end had little more to show for their efforts than grandiose theories and a pile of dead clay. 1. It doesn't matter whether your objectives are in the area of art, business, ministry, sports, or relationships. The only way you can get ahead is to fail early, fail often, and fail forward. Take the journey. I teach leadership to thousands of people each year at numerous conferences. And one of my greatest concerns is always that some people will go home from the event and nothing will change in their lives. They enjoy the show but fail to implement any of the ideas that were presented to them. I tell people continually, we overestimate the event and underestimate the process. Every dream that anyone has achieved came because of dedication to a process. That's one of the reasons I write books and create audio programs, so that people can engage in the ongoing process of growth. People naturally tend toward inertia. That's why self-improvement is such a struggle. But that's also the reason that adversity lies at the heart of every success. The process of achievement comes through repeated failures and the constant struggle to climb to a higher level. In order to achieve your dreams, you must embrace adversity and make failure a regular part of your life. If you're not failing, you're probably not really moving forward. When it comes to facing failure, most people will grudgingly concede that any person must make it through some adversity in order to succeed. They'll acknowledge that you have to experience the occasional setback to make progress. But I believe that success comes only if you take that thought one step further. In order to achieve your dreams, you must embrace adversity and make failure a regular part of your life. If you're not failing, you're probably not really moving forward. The benefits of adversity. Psychologist Dr. Joyce Brothers asserts, the person interested in success has to learn to view failure as a healthy, inevitable part of the process of getting to the top. Adversity and the failure that often results from it should not only be expected in the process of succeeding, they need to be viewed as an absolutely critical part of it. In fact, the benefits of adversity are many. Take a look at some of the key reasons to embrace adversity and persevere through it. 1. Adversity creates resilience. Nothing in life breeds resilience like adversity and failure. A study in Time magazine in the mid-1980s described the incredible resilience of a group of people who had lost their jobs 3 times because of plant closings. Psychologists expected them to be discouraged, but they were surprisingly optimistic. Their adversity had actually created an advantage. Because they had already lost a job and found a new one at least twice, they were better able to handle adversity than people who had worked for only one company and found themselves unemployed. 2. Adversity develops maturity. Adversity can make you better if you don't let it make you bitter. Why? Because it promotes wisdom and maturity. American novelist William Saroyan said, "Good people are good because they've come to wisdom through failure." We get very little wisdom from success, you know. As the world continues to change at a faster and faster rate, maturity with flexibility becomes increasingly important. Those qualities come from weathering difficulties. Harvard Business School professor John Cotter said, "I can imagine a group of executives 20 years ago discussing a candidate for a top job and saying, 'This guy had a big failure when he was 32. Everyone else would say, 'Yep, that's a bad sign.' I can imagine that same group considering a candidate today and saying, 'What worries me about this guy is that he's never failed.' The problems we face and overcome prepare us for future difficulties. 3. Adversity pushes the envelope of accepted performance. Lloyd Ogilvy says that a friend of his, who was a circus performer in his youth, described his experience of learning to work on the trapeze as follows. Once you know that the net below will catch you, you stop worrying about falling. You actually learn to fall successfully. What that means is, you can concentrate on catching the trapeze swinging toward you, and not on falling, because repeated falls in the past have convinced you that the net is strong and reliable when you do fall. The result of falling and being caught by the net is a mysterious confidence and daring on the trapeze. You fall less. Each fall makes you able to risk more. 3. Until a person learns from personal experience that he can live through adversity, he is reluctant to buck mindless tradition, push the envelope of organizational performance, or challenge himself to press his physical limits. Failure helps prompt people to rethink the status quo. 4. Adversity provides greater opportunities. I believe that eliminating problems limits our potential. Just about every successful entrepreneur I've met has numerous stories of adversity and setbacks that open doors to greater opportunity. For example, in 1978 Bernie Marcus, the son of a poor Russian cabinetmaker in Newark, New Jersey, was fired from Handy Dan, a do-it-yourself hardware retailer. That prompted Marcus to team with Arthur Blank to start their own business. In 1979, they opened their first store in Atlanta, Georgia. It was called Home Depot. Today, Home Depot has more than 760 stores employing more than 157,000 people. They have expanded the business to include overseas operations, and each year they do more than $30 billion in sales. I'm sure Bernie Marcus wasn't very happy about getting fired from his job back at Handy Dan. But if he hadn't been, who knows whether he would have achieved the success he has today. 5. Adversity prompts innovation. Early in the 20th century, a boy whose family had emigrated from Sweden to Illinois sent 25 cents to a publisher for a book on photography. What he received instead was a book on ventriloquism. What did he do? He adapted and learned ventriloquism. He was Edgar Bergen, and for over 40 years he entertained audiences with the help of a wooden dummy named Charlie McCarthy. The ability to innovate is at the heart of creativity, a vital component in success. University of Houston professor Jack Matson recognized that fact and developed a course that his students call Failure 101. In it, Matson has students build mock-ups of products that no one would ever buy. His goal is to get students to equate failure with innovation instead of defeat. That way they will free themselves to try new things. They learn to reload and get ready to shoot again, says Matson. If you want to succeed, you have to learn to make adjustments to the way you do things and try again. Adversity helps to develop that ability. 6. Adversity brings unexpected benefits. The average person makes a mistake and automatically thinks that it's a failure. But some of the greatest stories of success can be found in the unexpected benefits of mistakes. For example, most people are familiar with the story of Edison and the phonograph. He discovered it while trying to invent
something entirely different. But did you also know that Kellogg's Corn Flakes resulted when boiled wheat was left in a baking pan overnight? Or that Ivory soap floats because a batch was left in the mixer too long and had a large volume of air whipped into it? Or that Scott towels were launched when a toilet paper machine put too many layers of tissue together? In science, mistakes always precede the truth. Horace Walpole. Horace Walpole said that, in science, mistakes always precede the truth. That's what happened to German-Swiss chemist Christian Friedrich Scombine. One day he was working in the kitchen, which his wife had strictly forbidden, and was experimenting with sulfuric and nitric acid. When he accidentally spilled some of the mixture on the kitchen table, he thought he was in trouble. He knew he would experience adversity when his wife found out. He hurriedly snatched up a cotton apron, wiped up the mess, and hung the apron by the fire to dry. Suddenly there was a violent explosion. Evidently the cellulose in the cotton underwent a process called nitration. Unwittingly, Scombine had invented nitrocellulose, what came to be called smokeless gunpowder or gun cotton. He went on to market his invention, which made him a lot of money. 7. Adversity motivates. Years ago, when Bear Bryant was coaching the University of Alabama's football team, the Crimson Tide was ahead by only 6 points in a game with less than 2 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. Bryant sent his quarterback into the game with instructions to play it safe and run out the clock. In the huddle, the quarterback said, "Coach says to play it safe, but that's what they're expecting. Let's give them a surprise." And with that, he called a pass play. When the quarterback dropped back and threw the pass, the defending cornerback, who was a champion sprinter, intercepted the ball and headed for the end zone expecting to score a touchdown. The quarterback, who was not known as a good runner, took off after the cornerback and ran him down from behind, tackling him on the 5-yard line. It saved the game. After the clock ran out, the opposing coach approached Bear Bryant and said, "What's this business about your quarterback not being a runner? He ran down my speedster from behind." Bryant responded, "Your man was running for 6 points. My man was running for his life." Nothing can motivate a person like adversity. Olympic diver Pat McCormick said, "I think failure is one of the great motivators. After my narrow loss in the 1948 trials, I knew how really good I could be. It was the defeat that focused all my concentration on my training and goals." McCormick went on to win 2 gold medals in the Olympics in London that year and another 2 in Helsinki 4 years later. If you can step back from the negative circumstances you face in life, you will be able to discover that there are positive benefits to your negative experiences. That is almost always true. You simply have to be willing to look for them, and not take the adversity you are experiencing too personally. So if you lose your job, think about the resilience you're developing. If you try something daring and survive, think about what you learned about yourself, and how it will help you take on new challenges. If a restaurant gets your order wrong, figure out if it's an opportunity to learn a new skill. And if you experience a train wreck in your career, think of the maturity it's developing in you. Besides, Bill Vaughan says, in the game of life it's a good idea to have a few early losses, which relieves you of the pressure of trying to maintain an undefeated season. Always measure an obstacle next to the size of the dream you're pursuing. It's all in how you look at it. Try, and you can find the good in every bad experience. What could be worse? One of the most incredible stories of adversity overcome and success gained is that of Joseph of the ancient Hebrews. You may be familiar with the story. He was born the 11th of 12 sons in a wealthy Middle Eastern family whose trade was raising livestock. As a teenager, Joseph alienated his brothers. First, he was his father's favorite, even though he was nearly the youngest. Second, he used to tell his father any time his brothers weren't doing their work properly with the sheep. And third, he made the mistake of telling his older brothers that one day he would be in charge of them. At first, a group of his brothers wanted to kill him, but the eldest, Reuben, prevented them from doing that. So when Reuben wasn't around, the others sold him into slavery. Joseph ended up in Egypt, working in the house of the captain of the guard, a man named Potiphar. Because of his leadership and administrative skill, Joseph quickly rose in the ranks, and before long, he was running the entire household. He was making the best of a bad situation. But then things got worse. The wife of his master tried to persuade him to sleep with her. When he refused, she accused him of making advances toward her and got Potiphar to throw Joseph in prison. From slavery to prison. At that point, Joseph was in about as difficult a position as he could be. He was separated from his family. He was living away from home in a foreign land. He was a slave. And he was in prison. But again, he made the best of a tough situation. Before long, the warden of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners and all the prison's daily activities. While in prison, Joseph got the chance to meet a fellow prisoner who had been an official from Pharaoh's court, the chief cupbearer. And Joseph was able to do him a favor by interpreting a dream the man had. When he saw that the official was grateful, Joseph made a request of him in return. "When all goes well with you," Joseph asked, "remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." 4. Joseph had great hope a few days later when the official was returned to court and the good graces of the monarch. He expected any minute to receive word that Pharaoh was setting him free. But he waited. And waited. 2 years passed before the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he did so only because Pharaoh wanted someone to interpret one of his dreams. Finally. The payoff. In the end, Joseph was able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And because the Hebrew showed such great wisdom, the Egyptian ruler put Joseph in charge of the entire kingdom. As the result of Joseph's leadership, planning, and system of food storage, when famine struck the Middle East 7 years later, many thousands of people who otherwise would have died were able to survive, including Joseph's own family. When his brothers traveled to Egypt for relief from the famine, 20 years after selling him into slavery, they discovered that their brother Joseph was not only alive, but second in command of the most powerful kingdom in the world. Few people would welcome the adversity of 13 years in bondage as a slave and prisoner. But as far as we know, Joseph never gave up hope and never lost his perspective. Nor did he hold a grudge against his brothers. After their father died, he told them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph found the positive benefits in his negative experiences. And if he can do it, so can we. To help you do that, you need to take the next step when it comes to attitude. You have to be able to deal positively with failure.